In the quiet valleys of Montana, where the sun rises slow over endless fields of golden wheat, Jack Harlan's ranch stood like a steadfast sentinel against the wind. It was early spring, the kind where the air still carried a chill that nipped at your fingertips, but promised warmth by noon. Jack, a man in his late 30s with calloused hands and eyes weathered by years of hard labor, stepped out onto the creaky wooden porch of his modest farmhouse. His boots thudded softly on the salt-streaked boards as he surveyed the land that had been in his family for generations. The ranch wasn't grand and no sprawling mansion or fancy stable, but it was home, a place of sweat and soil, where the days blurred into one another like the rolling hills. Jack's wife, Sarah, had passed 3 years back, taken too soon by a fever that swept through the valley like a thief in the night. Left behind was their daughter, Lily, a fragile slip of a girl just turning 8, with Sarah's soft curls and a smile that rarely broke through these days. Lily spent her hours in the shadow of the house, her small world shrinking with each passing season. The ranch hands came and went, rough men who tipped their hats but had no time for a child's quiet games. Jack tried, God knows he did, but the weight of the ranch pressed on him like an unyielding yoke. Feeding the crew, mending fences, tending the cattle, it left little room for tenderness. And so, the kitchen, once alive with Sarah's laughter and the scent of fresh loaves, had fallen silent, save for the occasional pot of beans or slab of cornbread slapped together in haste. That morning, as Jack sipped his black coffee from a chipped mug, he felt the familiar ache in his chest. The hands had grumbled the night before about the store-bought bread, dry as dust and twice the price. "We need real bread, boss," one had said, his voice gravelly from the dust. Jack knew it was true. He couldn't keep running to town every week, not with the calves dropping and the irrigation ditches needing repair. He needed help, someone steady who knew their way around a flour sack and an oven. That's when he remembered Emily Carter, the baker from Willow Creek, the little town 10 miles down the dirt road. Folks spoke of her pies at the general store, how they melted in your mouth like summer sunlight. She lost her husband to the war overseas, they said, and now ran a small shop, but maybe she'd take on extra work. Jack hitched up the old Ford truck, its engine coughing to life like an old friend reluctant to wake. The drive to town was a familiar rattle over potholes, past grazing steers and the occasional hawk circling lazy overhead. Willow Creek was a blink of a place, a diner, a feed store, and Emily's bakery squeezed between them, its window dusted with flour and promise. He parked and pushed open the door, the bell jingling softly. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of yeast and cinnamon, warm against the crisp morning outside. Emily looked up from behind the counter, her hands dusted white as she kneaded dough on a scarred wooden board. She was in her early 30s, with auburn hair tied back in a loose braid and eyes the color of fresh earth after rain. There was a quiet strength to her, a grace born of hardship, but her smile was easy, lighting the room like a lantern in dusk. "Morning, Mr. Harlan," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "What brings you in so early?" Jack cleared his throat, feeling suddenly out of place among the drawers of honey and braided loaves. "Call me Jack." Well, the ranch needs bread. Real bread, not that packaged stuff. The hands eat like horses, and I ain't much for baking. Wondered if you'd consider coming out a few days a week. Pay you fair at $20 a day, plus supplies. Emily paused, her hands stilling on the dough. She thought of her own empty evenings in the little apartment above the shop, the silence that echoed her loss. Her husband, Tom, had been a dreamer, always talking of starting a farm someday. Baking kept her busy, but the ranch. It sounded like a change, a breath of fresh air away from the town's prying eyes. "I'd be glad to, Jack," she replied, her voice steady. "When do you want me to start?" By noon the next day, Emily arrived at the ranch in her beat-up Chevy, a basket of starter dough and tins in the back. Jack met her at the gate, pointing her toward the kitchen with a nod. "Oven's old, but it heats even. Lily's around somewhere, my girl. She don't bite." He turned back to the fields, leaving Emily to settle in. The kitchen was a sunlit haven, with gingham curtains fluttering at the open window and a cast-iron stove that gleamed from rare polishings. Emily rolled up her sleeves, her movements deliberate, almost meditative. She measured flour, sifted it through her fingers like fine sand, and mixed in water from the well, cool and pure. As the dough rose, she hummed a soft tune, one her mother had taught her back in Ohio before the family headed west. The yeast bubbled gently, filling the air with a comforting warmth that seeped into the walls. It was mid-afternoon when Lily appeared in the doorway, a shadow of a girl in a faded dress, her bare feet silent on the linoleum. She clutched a rag doll, its button eyes askew, and watched Emily with wide, cautious eyes. Emily glanced up, her hands deep in the dough, and smiled without pausing. "Hello there, you must be Lily." "I'm Emily, come to make some bread that'll make your daddy's hands happy." Lily didn't speak, but she edged closer, drawn by the rhythm of Emily's work. The girl had always been quiet, even before Sarah's passing up preferring the company of chickens in the coop to people, but something about Emily's voice, soft and unhurried, pulled her in. "What's that smell?" Lily whispered finally, her voice like a rustle of leaves. "Yeast and hope," Emily said with a gentle laugh. "It's rising, see? Like magic, but better because you can eat it." She dusted her hands and knelt to Lily's level, offering a small ball of dough. "Want to help? We can make a little loaf just for you." Lily hesitated, then took the dough, her small fingers tentative at first. Emily guided her, showing how to knead with the heels of her palms, pressing and folding until the dough sprang back smooth. They worked side by side, the kitchen alive with the soft slap of hands and occasional giggles when the dough stuck to Lily's nose. By the time the loaves went into the oven, Lily was chattering about the doll's adventures in the hayloft, her words tumbling out like they'd been bottled up too long. Jack returned at dusk, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in strokes of pink and orange. He paused at the door, drawn by the golden light spilling from the kitchen window. Inside, the table was set with steaming loaves, their crusts crackling as Emily sliced one open. Lily sat beside her, crumbs on her chin, laughing at some shared joke. Jack's heart stuttered. It had been years since that room felt like this, warm, full, alive. He stepped in, hat in hand. "Smells like heaven," he said gruffly, though his eyes lingered on Emily. The days stretched into weeks, each one unfolding like the slow unfurling of a fern in spring. Emily came 3 times a week, her routine as steady as the ranch's heartbeat. Mornings began with the crackle of the fire in the stove, the sizzle of butter and the pan for the hands' breakfast. She'd bake hearty loaves studded with seeds and herbs from her garden back in town, enough to fill the bellies of 10 men. Afternoons were for Lily simple joys like pressing cookies from cutters shaped like stars or stirring batter for cornbread that puffed high and golden. Emily never pushed, she let the girl lead, whether it was weaving flower crowns from the meadow weeds or reading picture books by the window, their voices weaving a quiet tapestry. But beneath the calm, a problem simmered, relatable as the ache of a long day's labor. Jack watched it all from afar, his chest tight with unspoken longing. He'd hired Emily for bread, plain and simple, but she was mending more than dough. Lily bloomed under her carry, a color returning to her cheeks, her laughter echoing through the house like birdsong after rain. Yet Jack held back, his grief a heavy coat he couldn't shed. Sarah's ring still sat in a drawer, a ghost he wasn't ready to disturb. And Emily? She felt the pull too, in the way Jack's gaze softened when he thought she wasn't looking, in the extra firewood he chopped for her trips home. But she had her own scars, Tom's letters yellowing in a box, dreams of a family deferred. Coming to the ranch was a job, she told herself, nothing more. To blur those lines would invite heartache, and she'd had enough of that. The tension built gently, like clouds gathering on a distant horizon. One evening, as thunder rumbled low, a storm rolled in fierce and sudden. The hands bunked down early, but Lily woke crying, frightened by the flashes that lit the sky like God's own fireworks. Jack went to her, but his words were clumsy, his arms awkward around her trembling form. "It's just noise, darling. Go back to sleep." But Lily clung tighter, her sobs pulling at him like barbed wire. Emily, staying late to finish a batch of rolls for the morning, heard the commotion from the kitchen. She set down her rolling pin and climbed the stairs, her footsteps soft on the worn threads. In the doorway of Lily's room, lit by a single kerosene lamp, she saw the scene, Jack's broad shoulders hunched, Lily's face buried in his shirt. Without a word, Emily slipped in, sitting on the bed's edge. "Hey, little one," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm. Storms are just the sky talking to the earth. Remember that story I told you about the thunder being a big old bear dancing? He's friendly, see, dancing for the rain to grow the wheat. Lily peeked out, tears streaking her face, and reached for Emily. Jack stepped back, watching as Emily gathered the girl close, rocking her gently while humming that same old tune. The rain pattered on the roof, a steady rhythm that matched their breathing. Lily's eyes grew heavy, her body relaxing into sleep. Emily laid her down, tucking the quilt with care, then turned to Jack in the dim light. He stood there, a shadow of a man, his face etched with something deeper than exhaustion, a gratitude, perhaps, or the first crack in his armored heart. "You got away with her," he said quietly, his voice rough as gravel. "Ain't seen her like that since." "Well, you know." Emily nodded, her own throat tight. "She's a good girl, Jack, just needs someone to listen." They stood in the hallway, the storm fading to a whisper outside, the air between them charged with unspoken words. For the first time, Jack reached out, his hand brushing her so a fleeting touch, warm and electric. Emily didn't pull away. The twist came not in thunder, but in the quiet dawn that followed. Jack rose early, the ranch stirring with the first light. He saddled his horse and rode into Willow Creek, the path familiar but his purpose new. At the jeweler's, a dusty shop beside the bank, he browsed the cases until his eyes settled on a simple gold band, set with a single pearl, elegant, unassuming, like Emily herself. It wasn't Sarah's ring that once stayed in the drawer, a memory honored but not chained to the future. This was for tomorrow. Back at the ranch, Emily arrived as always, her Chevy kicking up dust. She stepped into the kitchen, tying her apron, but Jack was there waiting, not out in the fields. Lily hovered nearby, her eyes bright with a secret. "Emily," Jack said, his voice steady now, no trace of gruffness. "I hired you for bread, but you've given us so much more. You've brought light back to this place here to Lily, and to me." He pulled the small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal the ring. "I don't want you coming just a few days a week. I want you here, always. Marry me." Emily's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling as Lily clapped with delight. The kitchen, still scented with yesterday's yeast, felt vast and intimate all at once. She thought of Tom, of the life she'd lost, but also of the one unfolding now, rich with possibility, grounded in kindness. "Yes, Jack," she whispered, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, warm as his hand enveloping hers. In the months that followed, the ranch transformed, not in grand ways, but in the subtle shifts of heart. Weddings in Montana were simple affairs, a gathering under the big oak by the creek, with the hands in their Sunday best and Lily scattering wildflowers. Emily's bakery in town thrived with her new recipes, infused with ranch fresh eggs and honey. And the bread? It became legendary, baked with love that rose higher than any yeast could claim. As the sun set on their first year, Jack and Emily sat on the porch with Lily between them, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. Life wasn't perfect, the ranch still demanded its toll, storms still cameo, but in the kindness that had sparked it all, they found a foundation stronger than stone. Sometimes, the greatest harvests come not from the soil, but from the gentle tending of the soul. And if you're feeling a bit adrift in your own days, remember, a small act of warmth can bake a whole new beginning. Reach out, listen, and let love rise.